Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 216 and we have a good one for you today. Today's fish comes at a special request from one of my long-term viewers and one of my biggest supporters of the channel. Shout out to you, Murmurwag. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, all that you have, and sticking with me through these highs and lows in the channel. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is... bam! The brook trout. Now, my daughter is over there watching Frozen, so she is singing. So you might hear some in the background, but she's going to sing her heart out and do what toddlers do. But back to the fish. So the brook trout, or scientific name Salvelinus fontinalis. Again, that's Salvelinus fontinalis. It is part of the family. Hi. It is... I know you love this song. It is part of the family Salmonidae, which is the family of salmon and trout. Now there are other fish in the family, but those are the most known. Your graylings, your, I believe are called tinooks, char, things like that. Those fish are also in the trout and salmon family, but you're most notably going to know these around salmon and trout. Now, the brook trout is native to eastern North America, predominantly the northern U.S., around the Great Lakes east, and throughout southern Canada. Yes? What is that? Is that a fish? Well. Can you say hi? That's right. Hello. Hello, everybody. Say happy Fish Friday. Hi. I love you, Munchkin. Anyway, so brook trout has been introduced outside of its native range. So yes, it is found around the native northern U.S., but they are pretty common throughout the world. It's kind of hard pressed to find. Well, I shouldn't say that. I want to retract that statement. They've been introduced to many places other in the world, but I don't want to say they're common. They're pretty prevalent throughout most of the western United States in select water bodies, but it's not like you can go to any water body and find these even outside of its native range. They do occur in Hawaii and Europe and things like that. So they have been spread pretty wide, but I wouldn't say they're just completely dominant across the world, not like largemouth bass or bluegill are. Now, in terms of where you're going to find this fish, they can be found in all sizes of water. Lakes, rivers, streams, ponds, essentially anywhere that's wet and it has clear waters with flow and plenty of cover. And it's important to note that I said lakes and ponds, and then I say they like flow. They don't necessarily need flow, but you also have to remember lakes and ponds, especially larger ponds, actually have a flow going in the system that you don't see. So you know how like the ocean has their currents and everything? Lakes will have many currents, so the water will actually be moving in lakes more than a lot of people think. So just because it's a lake, do not assume that there is no flow. But they also like colder waters as well, which would make sense. If they're going to be found in southern Canada and in the northern US, they're going to be found in areas that have typically colder water. Now, this is a medium-sized trout species, heavily sought after. It's one of the bigger ones that is very popular among anglers, but it's more of a medium-sized trout species. Usually around 25 to 65 centimeters, which is 10 to 25.5 inches, and weighing anywhere from about 0.3 to 3 kilograms, which is 0.5 to 6.5 inches. That's not a shark. That's a trout. Sorry, I had to correct her. Got to teach them young that this is not a shark. It is a trout. That's right, not a shark. Good job. High five. Pal. Maybe I should have just done, maybe you should just do a video talking to you about fish. It might be a very good special Fish Friday. Max recorded length was actually around 34 inches, which is 86 centimeters. And the maximum weight is around 6.6 kilograms, which is around 15 pounds. So they can get relatively big in terms of how trout goes, but you know, we have done a couple of trout species on the channel before, and it's obviously nowhere near like the lake trout, which that one can get monstrous in size. Now they're usually having this dark green coloration, maybe a little brown, but what's important to know about trout is what really defines trout species, if you're identifying them in the field, is how their spots are arranged. It's actually a little more difficult than people think if you don't know what to look for. But luckily, the brook trout has a couple of characteristics that are very easy to spot once you know. And it's actually this vermiculation pattern. So the spots become this vermiculated pattern across the top that extends up into the dorsal fin. That is actually pretty diagnostic about the brook trout. Some trout have spots going all over that you don't see. These go spots to vermiculations. Now in breeding, they're obviously absolutely gorgeous. They'll get this orange belly, but they'll have these very bright orange pelvic and anal fins with this white leading edge. And you can even see that here, even outside of breeding, they're still going to have that white leading edge. But outside of breeding, you're probably going to have more of your blander fin coloration. They're going to be more see-through. Now, the brook trout does predominantly eat insects, not just aquatic insects, but terrestrial insects that fall on the water, which is why trout are so popular among fly fishermen, because usually when you're fly fishing, you're actually imitating smaller insects, smaller things, not your larger, like largemouth bass lures and things like that. But that doesn't mean they only eat insects. They'll eat pretty much anything, crustaceans, amphibians. There's even some records of them eating voles, which is a very small rodent, if they are big enough and the vole is small enough. So they're actually a pretty voracious predator, or can be anyways. Now, in terms of their reproduction, they actually reproduce using reds. And I don't know if I've spoken about reds before or with the other trout here, but there's actually a very specific spot where reds get made. Yes, it is a depressional cavity just like many other species of fish make. They clear out a section of gravel, they clean it up, and that's where they deposit their eggs. But reds are actually very specific in that they find a gravel portion of the stream where groundwater is actually percolating up into the water column, meaning they have groundwater. Think of it as a tiny spring. That's what's actually helping them oxygenate their eggs and protect their eggs, or keep their eggs healthy. And once the red is made, the female will deposit around 5,000 eggs. Males will come and fertilize them, and then they'll usually gestate from winter to early spring. They actually go into a little bit of a incubation or hibernation period with eggs. Then they hatch into fry. What's interesting about the fry is the fry very, very quickly develop into fingerlings, which are, think of it as like the teenager of fish. But when they get to fingerlings, they'll actually develop these marks called par marks. This is a better one right here. So the par marks are almost like where the trout has the opposite of its adult coloration. Instead of many white, lighter colored spots, they actually have a few black bars traveling down the side. And so you can see here how it's actually transitioning from the fingerling to adult, and it's losing those par marks. Now, sometimes in adults you will continue to see par marks, but it's a lot more faint, at least. Now, this is actually a short-lived fish. They live to around 3 to 4 years old, but they are relatively quick to reproduce, because they'll actually reproduce, and an individual will be ready to reproduce the same year that it's born, which allows them to have that sort of quick lifespan. Now, this fish is very, very important for artificial propagation and aquaculture. They've been basically farm raised since the 1800s, which is, and not only just for food production, they'll actually be raised to supplement wild populations. And speaking of wild populations, it's actually a really unique sort of system, is that in their native range, brook trout are actually under stress, borderline. Some areas are probably threatened. I don't believe they're federally protected yet, except for other trout laws, which we can get into a later date. But under their native range, they're actually losing individuals. So they do have supplemental populations and supplemental programs to assist their populations. And the decline in their native range is due to your kind of standard factors: deforestation, dams, pollutions, things like that. However, outside of their native range, they're usually considered invasive, especially in Hawaii, Europe, Yellowstone Park in America. They're actually so invasive that people are encouraged to take as many brook trout as they possibly can, because they're actually so invasive and they pose an incredibly bad threat. And especially when it comes to other trout species. What a lot of people don't realize is that trout and salmon, I mean, everyone when they were younger heard about trout and salmon traveling up the same river, going upstream to spawn in the same area and all that. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there is a lot of trout and salmon species that are not really talked about, because their range is actually very, very small. The Apache trout, and that's just one example I can think of. So they're only found along one stretch in Arizona. That's where they are. There's other trout that are like that as well. So a lot of effort goes into protecting these trout species, but a lot of trouts can actually hybridize with each other. So in an effort to keep the populations pure, that is why, trout releases are actually very heavily regulated and a lot of times frowned upon. And it's why this fish, even though in its native range it's in trouble, outside of its native range, it's being encouraged to be gotten rid of, basically. But for the interesting fact we're going to end the video on, it's going to be a quick one, but it was really neat to me. I didn't know this. So they actually come in two distinct ecological forms. And there are two forms are called salters and coasters. Now, coasters are actually a patamodrous, there you go, patamodrous population, meaning they live in lakes and larger bodies of water, and then they migrate up rivers and streams to actually spawn. And they're usually around the Great Lakes region. Versus the salters are actually anadromous. That's your more traditional salmon and trout sort of lifestyle. So they grow up, then they travel out to sea and spend about 3 months out in the sea or ocean, and then they travel back up the river to spawn. So that kind of standard salmon trout lifespan or life cycle. Whereas coasters are usually found in these water bodies, and usually larger water bodies, and then they just travel up the river to spawn, still following that migration pattern, but they're actually fully freshwater their entire lives, which is, anything that has two distinct unique forms but are still considered the same species is always of interest to me. So I hope you enjoyed that there. Also, how can you not love the fact that their forms names are salters and coasters? Always fun. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Yes, she just woke up from her nap, which is why her hair is crazy. But thank you guys so much again. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the link down below. It is by no means expected, but very much appreciated. Regardless, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and peace. Can you say bye? Say bye. Say bye. Nope. Okay. She doesn't want to say bye. She's going to miss you too much. Have a good day, everyone.